Okay, we had a huge week in crypto. I think one of the biggest or most significant weeks definitely for crypto. Let's just look at this chart. It pretty much tells the story. This is the ETH BTC chart. You can see we had 7 green candles in a row. This is like the massive reversal for ETH BTC this week. We had the Bitcoin dominance chart. Because the ETH chart moved up, we had the Bitcoin dominance chart also have 7 red candles, and that broke down the Bitcoin dominance. But even though the week was so big, I think I discovered something that is going to show you that there could be a pullback next week, and we should be maybe just getting ready for a pullback next week. And then I want to talk about the rest of the cycle and, you know, this blow off top that we're going to have. And I've got Henrik with us today. He's a big fan, a big friend of the show. He's here with me, and we're going to be talking about the rest of the cycle, the blow off top, where we're at. So it's going to be Saturday Night Live. We're going to have a lot of fun here today. So listen, if that sounds good to you, you know what to do. Subscribe to the channel. Let's get going, guys. Can't tell you how good it is to be back here and to be streaming. I mean, I still can't feel my face from this appointment that I had, this dentist appointment, but I'm sure at some point my sensation in my face will come back and my cheeks will stop swelling. But I'm here and I'm bringing you crypto love and crypto wisdom on a Saturday. We've got an amazing show lined up here. I want to show you why I think there's going to be a slight dip next week. I still think the bull market is very, very, very much intact, but I think we're going to have a slight pullback in the week, and I'll show you where that's coming from. We've got a big show lined up with Henrik today. We're going to talk about whether it is Altseason, how long this Altseason going to last for, whether this is the final push, the blow off top. Lots to do today. So going to be fun Saturday night. We all Chipmunk's back. Yeah, Run the Hamster, Chipmunk's back. You guys can laugh, but I think tomorrow I'll have my feeling back, and then we'll be back in action. Chubby cheeks run. They love it, They love it. They love taking advantage of me. All right, well, let's talk about the week that was, because it actually was a very, very, very big week. Not only in the charts. The charts did tell a story. This is probably, you could say, the week that started Altseason. You can see the ETH BTC breakout over here. That was the accumulation. That's the breakout over there. We're back in the ETH BTC channel. That's a very good sign. The Bitcoin dominance. I mean, look at that. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8 red days in a row for Bitcoin dominance. That's like a very good thing. From a fundamentals point of view, I mean, I think we finally got the Genius Act. We finally got the Genius Act signed. I'll show you exactly what happened yesterday. So Trump actually signed it with his auto pen.
This is not an auto pen, by the way.
It's not an auto pen, that's what he said.
Which is a big scandal. If that were a Republican, it would really be a big scandal. But it is one of the great scandals of our time. Thank you very much, everybody.
So he signed it yesterday. Now, I want to pause this frame here, and I want to show you what... I mean, this is the craziest thing I've ever seen. Okay, maybe that's not the right frame to pause. But the people standing around him, the 𝗕𝗂𝗄𝗏 brothers are there. You can see the top of Brian Armstrong's head over there. Powell 𝗙𝗄𝗏 was also in the crowd. Powell 𝗙𝗄𝗏 from 𝗕𝗲𝗀 was also in the crowd. You can see I actually got you a little clip with Powell 𝗙𝗄𝗏 from 𝗕𝗲𝗀.
Powell Ardino of Tether.
I want to pause there just for a second. And for those of you who've been on this crypto journey with us for a long time, what are the chances that a sitting US president would be signing the Genius Act into law and call up the CEO of 𝗕𝗲𝗀 by name to acknowledge him and recognize him? I mean, this was state enemy number 1 in the Biden administration. The 𝗕𝗂𝗏 brothers were probably state enemy number 2, number 3. So the signing of this genius bill really was like befitting for the end of this big week that actually happened. David Sachs actually spoke about it. You know, he spoke about something here at the end, which I actually want to play for you guys.
There'll be a traditional dollar in a U.S. bank account, which will create trillions of dollars of demand for U.S. treasuries. So that is the power of this bill, is U.S. dollar dominance. This is a huge promise made and promise kept by President Trump. And there's just a few other people I'd like to thank. First, my family for being here. Thank you. And Bo Hines, who President Trump mentions, the director of our crypto council, he really did the heavy lifting here. So, Bo, I just want to thank you again.
Thanks a few people, but I want you to listen to something here, because I think it's quite important.
And my chief of staff, Tracy Johnson, as well, who also does the heavy lifting. And Bill Haggerty and French Hill and all the congressmen and senators who have already been mentioned by President Trump, so I'll save the time, but it was really been an honor to work with all of you. This was really a team effort, but most of all, I want to thank President Trump for accomplishing what nobody thought was possible. And it's true that just earlier this week, the media was reporting that this bill was dead. This bill was dead, and then the media didn't know one thing, that we had a secret weapon. We have a deal maker in chief. And thanks to President Trump.
I mean, President Trump obviously saved this Genius Act, because remember, it wasn't actually going to pass, and there was Republicans voting nay against it, et cetera, and we actually got it passed at the end of the week. So we finished the week with the altcoins very green. We finished the week with ETH BTC up. We finished the week with Bitcoin dominance down. But I told you before that I did see one chart that actually worried me a little bit, and I want to talk to you about that chart just before we get Henrik on the show with us. So the chart that worried me starts off by understanding where the gains of this crypto cycle are actually being made. Now, I think we all know that the one thing, I'm actually going to get us a list here. The one thing we know about this crypto cycle is that this crypto cycle is actually being powered by Wall Street money coming into crypto, right? So what powered Bitcoin in this cycle was Michael Saylor bringing TradFi money into MicroStrategy and using that money to buy Bitcoin. And then what started the ETH run was things like SBET and things like Tommy Lee's company, BMNR, getting money coming into those Wall Street listed vehicles, and them using that money to actually start buying crypto assets, right? So what we can basically say is we used to be playing in this $3 or $4 trillion market, which was the crypto market. And now the money that we're playing with is actually the Wall Street money, which is like $80 trillion. So you can't really compare. It's orders of magnitude bigger. And that's the money that's actually been powering the cycle. And I think the chart that worried me, that showed me that there may be a slight pullback. And I think it's a slight pullback, which is an overdue pullback, because it has been quite, like, if you look at funding, you can see funding has gone a little bit yellow, which means that the funding is starting to get heated a bit. It does feel like there needs to be a little bit of a pullback. So the chart that worried me was actually the chart of SBET. So SBET is Joe Lubin's listed ETH treasury vehicle. There was, when they announced the listing, this went from $2.56 all the way to, $123. Imagine that. And then it went all the way down. And then last week it started to really, really, really climb. So if you go back 7 candles, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7. So you start over here, you say, in about a week, this thing doubled. So I know this because I actually bought it at about $17 around here. And it went up to like $38 or $39 or $40 on this chart here. But what you can see towards the end of the week is that even though the price of ETH stayed more or less the same, it was around 3,500, there was a little bit of a cool down on Wall Street. So you can see on the last day, we had a candle that was about a 30% correction in the SBET chart, which kind of shows that Wall Street was looking for a little bit of a correction. And the same chart actually appeared here on MicroStrategy. So you can see on the MicroStrategy chart, we also had a little bit of a cool down, even though the Bitcoin price didn't come down very much. And what that may show us is it may show us that Wall Street's appetite, or Wall Street's getting a little bit scared, and next week they're going to maybe take their foot off the pedal a little bit, and that may actually filter into crypto. If it does happen, as I said, the bull market's very much intact. I'm not worried at all about the bull market, but I do think a good, healthy, slight pullback so we can carry on with the market pumping would be amazing. So that's the chart that actually worried me. Let's just take a quick look at where we are in the cycle. I think, you can see that, when it comes to altcoin season, we're nowhere near the real altcoin season. When it comes to fear and greed, we haven't even hit, last week we had extreme greed just like for one day or something like that. Funding, slightly elevated. I think the big question is, where are we in the cycle? Are we in this blow off top? Is this where everything is going to happen? I think for that, going to bring on our friend Henrik. Henrik, how are you, my friend? Not in your normal studio, right?
Not in my normal studio. This is vacation time in Denmark, so I'm actually visiting family at this point. So
yeah, so I know you're on vacation, and I just saw you tweeting, and your tweets got me so. I was on vacation too, and your tweets got me so heated about the next phase of this bull market that I was like, that's when I reached out to you and said, I know you're on vacation, but let's do this. Let's actually get together and have a Saturday night chat about where we are in the cycle, where we're going. So I think the first question is, like, are we in alt season? Like, are we here? Are we in this? Where on the chart? Where on this chart are we?
Well, I think we are in the Ethereum phase, or at least that's also what our models is pointing to, that we have now started to see the dominance of Ethereum versus Bitcoin. And that's quite also obvious in the chart that you just showed. And I have exactly the same, that when you start to see that phase, you'll see that Ethereum start to outperform Bitcoin. That is a good second phase. And then we'll start to see that and that's part of the capital rotation that we'll see. So Bitcoin has been the one attracting all the capital in, and we have all the doubts about that. We'll see an Altseason. It'll only be about Bitcoin this time, and then slowly we'll see Ethereum comes in, and then later on, I will expect that we see exactly what we have here, the large caps, and then finally the banana zone or whatever. Also, Ralph Hall calls it. Also, I think that is also going to come in at some point where we'll see just everything fly. So I think things are unfolding as we see them normally, and people have just been very, very impatient with things, but it's definitely developing as things normally would in the old season, I would think.
So one thing about this market which makes me incredibly, incredibly excited is that there is zero euphoria. Like Bitcoin is at $120,000.
At this point, yeah.
$118,000. The fear and greed is literally not even an extreme greed. I remember other cycles when we broke all-time highs, or when we were nibbling at all-time high territory. There was a ton of euphoria. There was retail. There was everyone else. There's no one here. There's no one here. So,
Agreed. I think that shows it all. I mean, that's what you want. You want to have the sentiment at these levels here, even though you have the fear and greed maybe up in the greed section now, but you want to have everything just, everybody talking about crypto, and it's just all over the place. And as you said, also, there'll be healthy pullbacks in this, but you're nowhere near as I see at the top of this cycle here. You have the development is going, there'll be some pullbacks, and all of a sudden people will start to realize, oh, this is the big thing, and they'll start pouring money into it, and you'll see that the development gets going. And you also have that the total crypto market is at new all-time highs, putting new all-time highs in every week. We also see that the altcoins index is also starting to show that it's getting closer to the all-time highs, but pushing up against that as well. So I think we're just seeing the early phases of this, and this time around there'll be some people that will be more ready because they've seen it before, and others will have to see that this is with disbelief in this part of the cycle, and say, well, we're not going to see an all season, it's not here, and I still get some pushbacks when I tweet that on X, but I think it's here and I think it's going.
How long would it last? So, I mean, like normally in cycles, the last part of the market, the altcoin blow off top, as you kind of call it, usually lasts like 4 months, 3 months. That's pretty much where the thing lasts. How long do you think this one will last? And the reason why I ask that is because one part of me wants to say, okay, well, then it's going to last 3 or 4 months and it's going to repeat the previous cycle. But on the another part of me says, we haven't even had the first like real bunch of rate cuts yet. Like the rates are still at 4.75 or wherever they're at. And I'm like, can you really have a blow off top with rates at 5% or 4.5%? Like it just doesn't feel right.
I think that's the US, right? So if you look at the US, the Fed, I mean, of course, they haven't been as accommodative this time around. But if you look to the rest of the world, there's plenty of support coming from central banks there. So if you look at the M2, which a lot of people have been looking at as X as well, the M2 is up, the global M2 is up. And we see that the balance sheets are also breaking higher there. So yes, the Fed hasn't done that. And maybe even this time around, we could see that the Fed has been more hesitant about this, and we could potentially see that it's driven by the expectation of this. Maybe it will be when the Fed finally gets in and cutting that we are closer to the top at that point. I mean, I could see that developing. So I'm not sure that it necessarily develops exactly the same. So the first time we did have the Fed was in closer on the cutting cycle there, but this time around it can definitely be also driven by liquidity coming out from central banks around the world. So that's what we see right now. And also the dollar, as you showed.
I was about to say, yeah, the 𝗕𝗂𝗓 to me looks like, like sometimes when the 𝗕𝗂𝗓 breaks down 10% or 12%, which it has done already, that does have a stimulus effect. I mean, that's effectively 12% more dollars in circulation. I mean, I know it's not a linear correlation, but it does feel like this drop in the dollar. And this drop in the dollar is exactly what happened the last time actually Trump came into power. I think that's over here. You can see over here, Trump came into power somewhere around there. And this is exactly, it's basic.
Yeah, I saw that.
Yeah. So how would you be positioning yourself now? Like, would you be, if you were sitting on a pile of Bitcoin, would you start moving into ETH now? Would you would you ignore ETH and just go straight into like lower down things like Solana? Do you think maybe you've missed the Solana run? How would you be positioning yourself right now?
I think actually, the table you showed just before, that you have Ethereum now is the next move, and then you'll have the, Solanas, and you'll have the by the end of it also meme coins and it will be the kind of the way to move into it. So actually, I have a portfolio. I'll maintain that, and I may be buying up some more, and along the way here as I expect them to start to shoot higher, but it's pretty much about sitting back as I see it, and then expecting these to start developing. So but for those who actually likes to move on to it, it's in an Ethereum phase now. Then will probably be some of the large caps. It can be any pick can be good for there. We have an impulse model going where we will simply see when the impulse starts to get going, and then you'll have that you can move into to that particular coin, and then you can jump out of when the target has got hit. So, but for me, I have a good portfolio, and I want. Sorry,
have we not missed ETH season? Is it not too late on ETH?
I don't think so. I mean, ETH has moved quite strongly, but I still think we got a little more here before we see a stronger pullback. I think we.
You can show us your charts. Yep. I've given you the screen here, so you can actually put up your.
Need to. Let me see if I can find it also. Hang on one second. I'll see. We'll just share it here, and we have the.
There we go.
Right here. I think, there we go. And I think we are we have a, good, nice setup here where it's still moving, and it'll still move a lot higher. I do expect that this phase here is actually where we're going to see also some of the smaller altcoins actually moving quite strongly. But for now, it's taking the lead as we wanted, as you showed also with the ETH Bitcoin chart. And I think we are seeing more of this kind of move, like in 2017, that we are seeing this kind of move here. So it seems like it's a more impulsive wave that is coming here. So I expect quite a lot more if you compare ETH to Bitcoin here. And then by the end of it, we're going to see some of the others here. If you take out the top 10 here, also making a lot. They hardly haven't moved yet, but I expect that to go a lot higher as well. So for now, ETH is taking charge of things, and then you're going to see the small coins or the altcoins really coming in at a later stage. So everything as we talked about really seemed to develop as we expected.
If you were sitting on a portfolio that was Bitcoin heavy, would you start rotating some of it into the altcoins, or would you still hold? Because we do expect Bitcoin to have a good run this cycle, right? Like it's the institutionalized asset, et cetera. Would you be rotating into ETH and Sol, or would you keep your cards close to your chest?
I think it again down to the individual risk profile of anybody who was in this. So but definitely I think Bitcoin has been running quite far. I still think there's a good run to it, as you also mentioned. And I can even see it but it'll be outperformed by other cryptos at this point. So I definitely think that if you're into that, that's the way of doing your the investment then a rotation like following the cycle will make sense.
Okay, let me talk to you about the Fed and reducing rates. So I feel really bad for Jerome Powell, because on the one hand, he has a mandate from the American people, and the mandate is protect unemployment and protect inflation. On the other hand, he has a screaming maniac who's saying tariffs. He has inflation. Actually, I mean, I know we don't want to talk about it, but actually inflation is increasing slightly. Inflation went from 2.4 in the previous reading to 2.7. This reading, that is a slight uptick in inflation. Unemployment, the economy is very, very, very strong. So the unemployment numbers aren't where they want it. How do you justify to Powell to actually cut rates? Like if you were sitting on the board of the Fed, what would you advise Jerome Powell to do?
So I think it's honestly, I'm again, when you want to avoid hitting the wall with your truck there, you start to apply it to brake before you're actually getting too close to it. And the problem is that if you have the way that the Fed is looking at things, they are looking at things that will start to develop very, very late in the business cycle. So if you look at the labor numbers, the job numbers and so on, they will start to drop all of a sudden, and you'll see that you're actually already there in the recession. So the problem is right now that if you do not start to apply the brakes in the hawkish setup that you have in the Fed at this point here, you are going to hit that wall. And we have to remember the Fed has been notoriously late with hiking rates or also cutting rates over the years. They said in 2008 in February, he was that was then Bernanke back then, saying, if we get close to a recession, we'll make sure to step in good time and make sure that nothing happens. We don't get a recession. That was in February 2008. We were already in a recession. It was actually 3 months old at that point, and you're going to see the worst, recession we've had for a long time at that point. So I do think there is a situation here where if you just share something here again, where we see that. Hang on, so here we have inflation rate at this point here. We have the consumer confidence, we have unemployment, and we have the Fed fund rate. Okay. And if we look at this, you'll see that. Right now, inflation CPI of 2.7 it is now. Yeah, okay. So it's because I haven't updated this, but let's just put 2.7 here. It's not really a big thing. I mean, if you look at over here, this is where times of where we had a good unemployment, economy was growing nicely, and these levels are fine. So this about thinking it has to be 2%. I mean, that's an arbitrary number that has been given. What we are looking at is the consumer confidence has been plummeting. And we are seeing unemployment clearly moving up. And yeah, we have something here on the on the latest that has just been hovering around this level here, but this is not looking good. So also if you look at it here, you will actually see that the Fed fund rate here, if you look when they started to cut at this point here into the financial crisis, the inflation number was much higher at that point.
Yes.
Also over here when they started to cut, they were much higher at this point.
But that was a crisis. Like in both of those. Like in a crisis, whether you want to cut or you don't want to cut, you have to cut because you're in a crisis. COVID, 2008, those were crises. Like right now, I don't see a crisis.
Nobody knew that there was a crisis back in January of 2008.
Yes. Okay.
I mean, there was a crisis there at that point. So the thing is that they were actually at this point here much higher with inflation. The thing is, inflation can actually, because it is, as I said, call it a lagging indicator, it actually can move up late into a slowdown in the economy. You see that every time it actually comes up, but then it comes down really strongly, and the Fed is then cutting like crazy and maniacs here. So that the Fed right now is looking at the unemployment number level going up. Consumer confidence is plummeting, and we are down here 2.7%, which is way below going into recessionary times here, way below that, where they were cutting in earlier days. Now they're sitting there saying, "Oh, we're afraid of tariffs." I think it's going to be the biggest blunder we ever seen in terms of from the Fed side here. I think we're going to see that the Fed will actually is going to cause a harder slowdown, because they should have started to apply the stimulus much earlier here at this point. So I'm actually agreeing with Trump, maybe not a 300 basis point, but much earlier. So the point is that the moment they start to see the developments in the labor market and in inflation, that is actually the point where it's already too late. And that's the problem.
So do you think that, I mean, there's been talk of Powell resigning early, or maybe Trump firing Powell or something like that. Let's just play out that scenario. Let's just say that hypothetically, Powell resigns, or Trump lands up firing him, or they land up getting rid of him because of this fancy Fed upgrade to the building, this $2 billion upgrade to the building. What happens to I played out that scenario in my mind, and what the scenario for me was weaker dollar. Immediately, when the Fed becomes politicized, then all of a sudden the dollar starts to collapse. If the dollar starts to collapse, the only way to maintain the dollar, if they want to maintain the dollar, is to increase interest rates. And then we're in a position where we've got higher interest rates. So how does it play out if Powell leaves early?
Yeah, I think you may be right. That could be an effect on the dollar, but there's always, as just the fact that you and I are sitting here discussing it is something that is already playing into the fact, right? So it's already playing into the price that you have on the dollar. So this is actually where it's not like it's a secret that we could see that situation. So I think that's why it's always difficult to play the narratives into the price action, because a lot of it, when we started to talk about it, it's already discounted for in the price of the asset. So I agree with you. It would probably be somewhat of a downward pressure on the dollar at that point. I don't know. It can also be that we've seen sometimes when you start to lower rates, you've seen that also most recently here from other countries, that then actually has a positive impact, because it's like the market say, oh, now the Fed is taking care, or the central bank is taking care of the economy, or is actually starting. That will mean that the economy will strengthen down the road, which means that the economy, that the exchange rate also and the dollar should then strengthen. So I'm not sure it's just that straightforward. I think that the dollar has already taken a lot of beating here, and I don't expect it to go much lower. I'm not saying it's bottoming out here. I'm just saying I think there will be more of a push lower, which is not going to be so strong. That's more from a technical perspective. So seeing let's see first of all if Powell resigns. I mean, it wouldn't be a good sign to anything that you have that, as you said, it will be politicizing the Fed. That's not a good thing. We don't want that. And I could see that could actually bring a lot of good things to crypto short term, because then people say, oh, now liquidity and abundance will come. But I'm not sure it will be good for the economy in the long run. So
I don't see Trump resigning. Powell resigning.
Powell resigning. No,
he's too strong, and I actually don't even see. I think Trump will just bide his time. He's got a year left with this guy. Just leave this guy for 12 more months. Let him do his thing. It's probably, from a risk return point of view, it's probably not the kind of thing that you want to be doing. Take me to the charts. In fact, no. Before we go into the charts, treasury companies. the leverage of the cycle is what I call them, right? Every crypto cycle ends because of leverage. I define leverage as money that doesn't exist entering the markets, money that's printed out of thin air entering the markets. I don't know if you've been watching this, but I'm sure you have, because we've all been watching it. But let me just switch screens here so you can see. I'm just giving you one example. You've got ETH treasury companies. The two big leaders are Bitmain, Immersion, and Sharplink. They're trading at two times NAV and 3 times NAV, which means that anything above NAV is what we call created money. So it's a leverage. I know you tweeted this, and you said every time a Bitcoin you add a Bitcoin to a treasury, you plant a small bomb. So I take it that you have the same view as me, that this is the thing that actually crashes the cycle, right?
I think it's much worse than that, unfortunately, because you know what you're introducing here is actually speculation into ordinary companies that should not. I have a friend sitting in a high position, actually that's the CEO of one of the S&P 500 companies, and I said, how are you looking at this? And said, should I start to speculate into this? I mean, what would that do? And what would it do if I look at Bitcoin starting to collapse into let's do a 50% decline? Because nobody can say it can't do 50% decline. I mean, you've seen that plenty of time. So what will then happen to my balance sheet, right? And I think that is what we're starting to see. We're starting to see the greed, and actually we're missing out on something. And if you're not part of Bitcoin, you're going to lose, and that's the kind of thing. And it's so difficult to sit there back. You want you to move into this, and then say, I think this is speculation, and why would we start to put on this? I mean, you might as well say, I think the euro is going to strengthen a lot over the next coming years, and I'm going to transfer, to exchange a lot of our dollars into euros, and then it goes against you, but it goes against you in a very big manner here. It goes back against you 50% or something like that. Do you want to do that? Is that the name of the game? Is that what you want to do as a CEO of I don't know what kind of company you're running? I think you're actually right on this. This is what is going to crash it. Is I want to go, you're putting small bombs into, balance sheets around the US, and then
I'm not worried about the small bombs. I'm worried about the big bombs. Like I get what you're saying. What you're saying is normal companies putting Bitcoin on their balance sheet, and they're not used to the volatility of it. And I think when you for the first time feel the volatility of Bitcoin, it's really scary. And very few people and companies are going to be able to weather that storm. I'm worried about the big bombs. I'm worried about in the first week, 300,000 ETH sitting in one entity, which is trading at twice its net asset value. I'm worried about another 300,000 ETH sitting in another entity, which is trading at 3 times its net asset value. My concern here is that as we're now we've been playing very well on the blackjack table, where there's a $3 trillion and a $2 trillion market cap. Now there's $80 trillion, which is starting to be filtered into these treasury companies, and they're buying something that you can buy on the street at $3,500. These guys are paying $11,000 for that same Ethereum, right? And what worries me, it's all good and well when the market's going well, but when the market turns and they all start running away, and this premium goes from 3 times NAV to 0.75 times NAV, that's going to be the unwinding. That's going to be for me the unwinding of the cycle.
Yeah, but I completely agree with you. And I'm just saying that everything here is also resting on that we have liquidity, and liquidity is not a given. It's not like you say, yeah, the central banks will be here forever. They'll make sure that, but they have always done, we always try to introduce liquidity at a certain point and make sure that we got a stable economy. But sometimes liquidity just evaporates. And if you look at the US housing market at this point, it's actually also on teetering at this point. It's not looking strong. So if you get that kind of hole in the ground opening up and liquidity dropping in there, you can easily see Ethereum, Bitcoin, and so on starting to decline a lot. I'm not saying it's going to do it here now, because as you also mentioned in the beginning here, I think I'm very, very bullish here, and I think we're going to see much higher levels. But when we get to the point of that, I agree with you. You just you spoke my I was preaching to the choir. You were preaching to the choir here, because I'm 100% with you. This is the problem that we're starting to see. That's the speculation now spreading in and out everywhere, and that is going to be the problem that will cause a lot of havoc if we see that, or when we start to see some pullbacks on this, because we can't sit and expect that something that just goes up, if somebody else comes and buy it, it doesn't, the value doesn't increase just, on a daily basis, because there's no new products coming to it or anything. It will actually need somebody else to come buy it. It's a speculative game, as I see it. So I agree with you 100%. It's
we are in
big bombs, small bombs, whatever.
We are in the big speculative part of the cycle. Anyway, let's talk some charts. Take me through some charts. Show me the S&P. Show me Bitcoin. Give me some scenarios. Right. Show me. I love your charts. Let's before we finish off, let's just get into some really cool charts here. Show us where we're going. Show us how long it's going to last.
Yeah, sure. So first of all, I mean the cycle model. Oh shoot, I'm just jumping away again. The model here showing us, this is the business cycle model, which is actually telling us that we are in late phase. This is the leading indicator now crossing over really strongly. It did that every moment when the Titanic hits the iceberg, and then the music will be playing. They will be able to buy drinks at the bar, but at some point we should see that in the real economy, which is the employment, manufacturing level, GDP growth. That is this. So to me, it's just a matter of when. Not if, but when, and that's where I analyze the charts here for the real economy. If you look at the S&P and the Nasdaq and so on, well, I think I'm a little in doubt of how deep we're going to see this summer doldrum. I think there's going to be somewhat of a pullback. I could see it actually going all the way down here, and I think there could be some kind of a setback at some point here during the summer before we then head higher into, as my target is minimum 6,800, 7,000. I could even see it as 7,500. Sure. In a crazy kind of move. So I think we potentially could see a stronger pullback than people will be expecting. Maybe it goes more sideways. We'll have to see. And the sideways market will be good for crypto. So if we look at crypto in general, I think let me see here. We look at Bitcoin, for instance. I mean, I think we're just below the 120,000 here. And I think we're going to crush that very soon. I think we can see a wave 3 developing here, maybe all the way to 145. It could be a little lower than that, but I also think there could be somewhat of a pullback. Again, these are speculative models. It may develop something like this. Could be into July. It can also mean that this is not going to be as deep. It's just a speculative setup that I have. But I'm saying I could easily see 175,000, 180,000, something like that before we get to the final top. Speculating again whether that could be into the September timeline, October timeline. We are not there yet. But if you look at the long-term divergence here, and this is what I want to make people aware of, this is that you have divergence here on a weekly, and that normally comes in up to the third top. Could be that we have a pullback first, like what we sometimes see, and it pulls back here and then goes back up again. Could be that we do something like that. But I'm just saying that when we get to that top, forget about 500,000 or 1 million or something like that. That is a very, very long divergence on the weekly, and I think that puts us up for the very big top. So I think we're putting a top in here, maybe 148, maybe 167. It could be 180, as I said. I'm waiting for we've seen it before. I mean, every time we have the big touches here on the momentum also, that is when we have a very big top in Bitcoin, and I think you're going to see somewhat of the same. Though that's not the same as saying that things are running out right now. And if you look here at the let's see if we can get it up running like that. This is this is Bitcoin, altcoins, and Ethereum. And if you look at that, if we go back and take a look at what happened into the previous top here, that was 21. We know that we may have a situation where Bitcoin is going to play out first, and no matter which kind of structure we could see, it could be like this, or But here it was like a rising wedge. We then saw that the Alts index actually, moved into the top of that of Bitcoin here, but then actually had another leg while Bitcoin was correcting after it actually made the big top. And we saw Ethereum also doing really well into that. So let's see if we get that kind of rotation. That's the rotation you started to talk about. So I think we are, seeing a development where we'll see a top in September, October of Bitcoin. We'll then see potentially a pullback, and then we're going to see the altcoins maybe topping out in, let's say then October or maybe even November. It depends. And then that will be it for this time around.
Are you saying the cycle top for this time around 160,000? I mean, that's like not a lot to go from here.
Yes, I think it probably is more like 170 or 80,000, but yeah, around that. Yes, I don't think that. But again, it will not be in a straight line. It'll not go straight from here. I think there'll be some pullbacks and or rather large pullback, maybe even in the summer. We need the sentiment to reset a bit, as you just showed also that we are in greed already, and I think we need to see that we get that kind of pullback. Maybe it doesn't start already. I don't think it necessarily comes next week already, but at some point we should see it. I think there are some more highs coming to Bitcoin before we see that pullback, and then we'll see, how long we can head on. But because again, I'm still meaning that you're going to see the opinion that when the real economy starts to slow, as we see it now, that doesn't matter what the Fed is going to do. They'll try to kickstart it again with liquidity, but liquidity is not going to solve some of the solvency problems that we have, and we see also with the consumer, and especially because liquidity only works in the real economy if you and I start to take the money, or no, I'm not a U.S. citizen, but especially in the U.S. But if we take the money we save through that, the interest rates is coming down, that and spend that, go spend it, and then it'll create more jobs and so on and so forth. If people are actually holding back on that this time, then I think we can have a different situation. I think there is the risk of that. So I think we have more upside, way more upside on the crypto, and Bitcoin also more. But the economy will set a stop for this at some point.
What about ETH? Like, where do you see the top of the cycle for ETH? You said Bitcoin 160, 170, 180. Where do you see the top of the cycle for ETH? The reason why I ask is because ETH is trading nowhere near its all-time high. And so I'm just trying to gauge from you, where does ETH go? Oh, wow. 6,400.
I think something like that. Yeah.
Wow.
And actually, that's been my even from down here. And that's based on this big pattern that you have here, which is an expanding diagonal. And you actually have these, clear pullbacks and A, B, C moves that you have A, B, and this was a C move. And it was like, you also had some divergence down there, which meant that it was, pretty nice to be able to pick it up at these levels here. And then you've seen the first move, and this suggests actually this with this kind of ABC of the A here that you're going to go all the way to 3,900, maybe 4,400 here before we see the top. Little less chance that we stop here actually, but I think we should hit something, see something like this, and in the final banana zone here or whatever the phase here, we should see this 63, 6,400, and maybe even higher. I mean, this is as a minimum as I see it.
And Solana?
Solana, let me see, we got a Solana here. Solana, where we at there? We have, so I think we are also here. We see how we've been breaking this bigger downward trend line here. That's quite significant. We'll see if we have to retest it. But again, I think you can see quite quickly or quite strong. Again, these are just indicative. Don't look at the time of the timeline. It's more to show that we are heading in that direction, and with that kind of speed that you saw here. So I could see that the next phase could bring us to 360s, 370. Before the pullback could also be that it stops 300, and then we'll have again the banana phase here. So as I said, we're just breaking out higher here from the levels, and we have so much more to go in terms of upside as I see it. So we early phase here, but that still doesn't change the whole setup of things, that this is something that is going to come to an end, but it doesn't end right here. And I can tell you the sentiment will be way more against us sitting here on your show in let's say 3 months time, and we'll talk about that there'll be a top to it. There'll be outcry that we must be crazy because look at the markets and so on. But at this point here, people are more muted because we're just getting started on the cycle.
Okay, and what other altcoins are you watching? I know you watch Bitcoin, ETH, Sol. What other altcoins are you watching on your charts?
So the Jasmine, I like that because I think it's a pretty nice chart in terms of, I like to where I can kind of, have a good idea of where the top potentially could be. This I can see at $30, sorry, 30 cents, obviously not dollars. 30 cents, which would make a lot of sense technically. That would bring us back up to where we were here in 21 November, and that's so I like that. That's a good play. I'm long 𝗕𝗏𝗂. And I know that will probably be one of some of those that starts to move, as we talked about when we have the Ethereum phase coming starting to rotate into the next phase. And then later on, I mean, also a lot of whiffs, and I think I can see $22 on that, which is a long way from where we are. But something like this also.
Whoa, did you say $22? That's 10x from where we are now.
Yeah, smaller than that. 22 times, yeah, something like that. Yeah.
Wow. Okay.
But that's based on but you've seen that many times in some of these if they start to move, and if you look at this kind of setup here, it's quite strongly suggests that you had a bottom here back in April. It was down at the 61.8 Fibonacci, and then you're going into the banana zone can just explode this. So as I said, we're nowhere near the top as I see it. I think we've been breaking out of the long-term downward trend line here and the trend line you had over here for WIF. And of course, they are not the ones in the center right now, even though they are starting to move up higher, as you see on the others here. Also, it seems like we're nowhere near the all-time highs we were in November 21. But we know that's the same thing for the total crypto market, which is leading because of Bitcoin is leading. And if you look at all the signals here, we just on go here in terms of higher levels coming. So with the rotation of some rotation from Bitcoin in what we have into some of the into altcoins and into the memes at some point, I think you're going to see an explosive and maybe the strongest altcoin phase of the Altseason that we have ever seen. So
amazing.
But we have to be patient though, but because it's not going to be in a straight line, and patience is not normally something that a lot of investors have when it comes to these things. But also knowing
when you
coming to the end of this, it's going to be bad. It's going to be
when you've been here for 3 cycles, then you start to develop patience, because the first 2 cycles you get really burnt because you're impatient, and then the 3rd cycle you learn to sit on your hands for a little bit longer. Henrik, I'm going to leave you to go and continue with your vacation. Much love. Thank you for coming on to Banter while you're on vacation. Real true degen, a real true friend of the channel. Thank you, my friend. Really appreciate it.
Thank you very much for having me on.
Great. Thank you, brother. That was amazing, guys. That was amazing. I'm glad I'm happy to be streaming again. And you can see that's why I'm back here on Saturday nights. While we're here, let's quickly just jump to the bubbles, just see if anything's happening in the market. There's not much going on. I mean, Tezos is up 40% today. I have no idea why. Maybe someone can tell me why Tezos is up 40% today. I'm still waiting for Pump to go below ICO price. It's very close. It's very, very close. It went last night. It went to like if I remember last night, it went to like $3.80. I think what's going to happen when Pump goes below the ICO price, I think a lot of people who manage to get in are going to cut their losses. And when they do cut their losses, I think that might be a good buying opportunity if you're looking for that. Otherwise, as I said, be careful of the dip that might come this week. And I showed you why earlier on, why I do think there's a dip. I wouldn't be too worried if it does come. It's just an amazing buying opportunity. If it does come, and even if it doesn't come, I would go look at the Bukele bot. Bukele bot is up 27%. So it has done more than Bitcoin, and I think more than ETH in the last 18 days. Remember, if you do want to go and trade in this Bukele bot, you have to use the link at the bottom of the show. Otherwise, it won't let you into the bot. It's a 𝗏𝗏𝗏 thing. They only allow certain links into certain bots, which is, I don't know, it's weird. Anyway, but it is what it is. So yeah, you have to use this link over here to sign up to 𝗏𝗏𝗏, and then you use this link to follow Bukele bot. I'd put some of your money into it, because it's a bot, it trades, it's a grid bot. The risk is relatively low. And the returns, as you can see, have been about 27% in the last 19 days, which I think very, very, very good. What else? What else is there? I think tomorrow we're doing another show. Tomorrow's show is around when to take profits. So we are in the big part of the bull market. Tomorrow we'll talk about when we're actually going to take profits and how we're going to cash out of this bull market. So if that sounds good to you, same time, same place tomorrow. Until then, trade well, my friends.